Hello everybody. Today I want to talk about note-taking. Note-taking is a really important skill for you to develop to not just improve your English, but to really understand the content of your classes. You should be taking notes in almost every class. In some classes you're going to be speaking or doing a presentation. But in classes where there's a lecture or there's information from the teacher, you need to be taking notes and writing everything down. So what I want to talk about today is first taking notes while listening. But the second part of taking notes is to take notes when you're reading. Taking notes is really a way to enter into the lecture, enter into the reading. Sometimes that's really difficult to catch what the teacher is saying, to enter into the story, the flow of ideas in a lecture. But note-taking is really the way to do that. Note-taking is not just copying things. That's a waste of time. But note-taking is a way of thinking, a way of listening more closely, a way of reading more deeply, a way of making the material your own, of internalizing the material. The process of writing causes your brain to process whatever you're doing. If you're listening, if you are reading, it allows your brain to work in a much more thorough and complete way. So what I want to give you today is several choices about note-taking for a lecture, but also note-taking for reading. Both of these are really, really important, and as soon as you develop this, you will really see that your ability to understand is really, really improved. So let's jump in. There's no exact perfect way to take notes. Everybody has a different way of thinking about taking notes. But let me give you three commonly used ways of thinking about notes. The first one is called TasSEL, T-A-S-S-E-L. And as you can see, it gives you some advice about how to take notes. First, try not to doodle. Doodle means to make meaningless little illustrations. Try to focus on keywords and don't let your mind wander. Note-taking is a way to focus and to concentrate. Second, arrive at each class prepared. It's easier to take notes if you know just a little bit about the topic. Plan ahead, think ahead before you come to class. Third, sit near the front of the classroom. The farther you sit back in the classroom in a big class, the harder it is to hear. If the lecture is in English, that's even more the case. It's harder to hear at first. You've got to sit towards the front. Sitting in the front really lets you focus. Try not to sit with your friends. Well, it depends on your friends. Some friends are great, some friends are helpful, but other friends are just distracting. In general, it's good to sit alone. You can really concentrate. You can always talk to your friends after class. Try not to daydream too much. Of course, being young is daydreaming time, and daydreaming is wonderful, but save your daydreaming when you go to Kisaten after class, or when you're sitting looking out at the Mount Fuji, a beautiful view. Last, try to look at the teacher. Looking at the teacher helps you concentrate and hear. Some people have said 80% of communication is body language. In a lecture situation, I'm not sure that's true, but Body language helps you understand what's being said. Now, let me give you a second option for thinking about note-taking, and this system is called swam. First, integrate all previous notes and readings. That is, look back at your notes for the week before. Be prepared for this week's. Second, sit close. That's the same as in the TasSEL. Third, write everything. This is impossible, of course, but you need to write the main points. If you miss a point, it will break the order, break the organization of the lecture. So you need to try to write almost everything. Certainly when you're reading, it's easier to write all the main points. You have to skip many things. Don't write all the words. Don't write sentences. Write keywords only, but try to write all the ideas. That's the meaning here. Analyze the verbal, nonverbal, and body language cues. That is, listen fully and completely. Don't just listen with your ears. Try to listen completely to what the lecturer is saying. You can pay attention to people and hear better if you concentrate on all of those cues that a teacher gives you as they lecture. And last, monitor your attention. Monitor your attention means to pay attention to yourself. Am I awake? Am I paying attention? Sometimes your mind wanders. This is normal. It's almost impossible to remain completely and perfectly attentive to everything that goes on in a lecture. If your mind wanders a little bit for a few minutes, nothing is gonna go wrong, but then bring your mind back to concentrate on what the professor is saying. Now, the most common way of taking notes is called the Cornell note-taking system. And I think this is a pretty good system because it's organized, it's helpful, it's thoughtful, it's creative. It allows you to really put things in order and to see things clearly. So let's take a look. The Cornell note-taking system, as you can see here, is divided into 3 sections. You have the cue column on the left, the note-taking column in the middle, and a summary at the end. That means after class, you should write a kind of summary. What was most interesting, what's most meaningful, what was the key point of the lecture. So try to think of that. Here's a little bit better example. On the left-hand side is just keywords, key points. 1 or 2 words, that's enough. In the main section is notes from the teacher. This is a way to listen more closely. If you're reading a book, this is a good way to focus on the key points of the reading. And then at the bottom, put a summary. Here's some examples from real students. This is a lecture. You see on the left, there's not much there. What is a noun? What is a pronoun? But on the main section is the 8 parts of speech, right? This is only 2 of them, not all 8. And then it's page 1 and page 4, right? So this is pretty good notes. Use a lot of paper. If you want to save the rainforest and not cut down trees, then join an NPO as a volunteer. But when you're in class, use a lot of paper. Some people are taking notes more and more on computer. This is excellent. Please do this. It's a great way to focus. Here's another example of Cornell notes, taking notes for English class. On the left you can see irony, characterization, character, conflict, etc. On the right-hand side is more detailed notes. And at the bottom is a great summary of what putting the lecture notes into your own words. This really helps you process what's been said. Taking the notes allows you to capture it and bring it a little ways in. Writing a summary at the bottom really allows you to internalize everything that you've heard. Okay? Now, when you're in a big lecture room, it's even more important that you take really good notes. You won't be able to remember anything. You're not supposed to memorize things, and you're not supposed to just quote-unquote know it. You've got to be able to review what you heard, and you need to be able to really process what you've listened to, not just record it. Recording it would be easy. Just turn on a recorder. But that's not what you're doing. Taking notes is not recording. Taking notes is thinking. This is a key point and a very important point to understand about note-taking. Now, you also need to take notes when you read. I take notes in about 3 different ways when I read something. Now, here's an example of a short story called Girl by Jamaica Kincaid. Great story. I highly recommend you reading it. Now, what I do here is to take notes by underlining and by putting some notes along the left-hand side. When I read something, I always note on the left, on the right, what's happening. This helps me remember where it is. This is a super short story, but even in a short story, it's easy to forget where things are. This is a pretty simple example of note-taking while reading a short story. But for novels and for longer works, I put even more information inside the book, inside the novel or whatever book it is that I'm reading. Not books from the library, of course. I don't write in those. But the books that I have that are my own, they're all marked up. Notes take up a huge amount of the space in those materials. Now, let me give you another example here of the note-taking for a novel. I do note-taking on a novel. This is a novel called The Road by Cormac McCarthy. And you can see the numbers here, right? Unfortunately, The Road doesn't have chapters. It's just one straight-through novel. So I just put the numbers. If the novel has chapters, of course, I put the chapters so I can remember where everything is. Here's an example of a different novel that has chapters, and you can see the notes are put chapter by chapter. That makes it easier. But in The Road, it's just straight stories, so I have to put the page numbers down. But almost every page, I try to write down what happens, right? And what's going on. Try to make some connections. You can see on the last pages. And the connections start to become more complicated in the last section. But that's not all the notes I take for a novel or an article or whatever I'm reading. I also put down notes according to ideas. Okay, so here you can see I'm looking at The Road for dreams. This novel has many dreams in it, and those dreams occur on certain spaces, certain pages. And I try to write down all the pages where the dreams are mentioned. On the right-hand side, God, sight, clothing, questions, right? I make a note for all of those questions. And taking notes like this is really the best way to understand a novel. It's hard to read a novel. Ethics, I can't remember what page ethics comes up. Water is really important in this novel because the earth is running out of water in the novel. And the lake, the river, occurs at several different points in the novel, and this is really, really important. I also write more general things that don't necessarily connect to a page number, like violence or the environment or culture or conversation. All of these are different points in the novel, different points that should be written down so I can remember. Whatever you're reading, an essay, a book, a chapter in a book, a novel, a short story, a poem, everything that you read, you should take notes. Taking notes helps you think. Taking notes helps you understand. There's really no way to learn without taking good notes. The ability to take good notes means that you're a good student. And when you're listening and when you're reading, you should always be taking notes. For that matter, you might jot down a few notes about life. For me, I always carry a piece of paper, and now I have on my cell phone and my iPad a note-taking device. I take notes on everything. If I see something in the city, if I think of something on the train, if somebody says something interesting to me, I take a note. It's a way of interacting with the world. Notes are a way to communicate to yourself. Jump on the note-taking, listening, reading. Your study skills will be up a level once you start taking notes. Take your notes in your own style. You don't need to do exactly like these. This is just one example. Try to take the notes in a way that makes sense to you, that is easy for you, that works for you. Start taking notes today. Start studying deeper. Start studying more intensely. Start thinking on